Hello my friends and welcome back to another video. It's Grace and today it is time to talk about some of my most disappointing / least favorite reads of 2021. I am known to myself and others for rating books somewhat highly, but I think that it's great that I enjoy most of what I read. However, there are still some books that stick out in my mind as being not what I hoped they would be, and or just not for me, not my taste, whatever the reason might be. So I have 8 books on this list as some of my either just least favorite or most disappointing books of the year, and I'll explain why each one of them is on here because they're not all the same reasons. So the first book that's on here is Chicken Soup for the Soul, Listen to Your Dreams by Amy Newark, and this book was a gift. It's not something that I picked up for myself. And I can acknowledge that it was very lighthearted and sweet, and I like the Chicken Soup books just for being uplifting, like that's what they're there for. But this one in particular is called Listen to Your Dreams because the entire premise of the book was basically people submitting stories about dreams that they have had that have either been like prophetic or some sort of premonition or inspirational or changed their life in some way. And while I can't deny that there are like some uplifting and optimistic value to hearing stories like that, they just don't grab me. Like, I feel like this sounds very ironic coming from someone who loves to read fantasy and stuff that is very obviously not real, but I think it's kind of cheesy, I guess. I just think it's cheesy. I think that was the problem. So through that entire book, I was kind of like drowning in the cheesiness of these stories. So I think it was a disappointment compared to other Chicken Soup for the Soul books that I've read, just because this one wasn't my taste. Like, for example, when I was a kid, I remember reading one about animals, like heartwarming stories about animals and people and their pets. And I love those kinds of stories. This subject matter just wasn't for me. The second book on this list is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is part of the Hunger Games universe and is the prequel that follows Coriolanus Snow, future President Snow, kind of in his origin story from the very first Hunger Games and his role in it and how he started to grow into the person that he becomes in the main series. And I knew that this book was getting some relatively negative ratings, but I was interested in it regardless, and I just have to say that it was a disappointment. When I read this book, I honestly thought that it was a mess. Like, the first half of it had me. I liked the first half. I liked the parts about some of the Hunger Games and meeting their tributes and the politics that went on, the fact that he had personal struggles with the financials from their family and all of that stuff. Like, I was on board for it. But the fact is that this eventually had to be a villain origin story because President Snow that we know in the main timeline is not a good guy. And I wasn't, by the end of the book, I was not convinced. I felt like things turned on a dime. I did not like how it ended at all. I just thought it was a mess. I thought the back half of that book was really bad. Not good. No good, very bad book. So, that's unfortunate. The third book on this list is Room by Emma Donoghue. And the reason that Room is on here is because I thought that it was going to be different than it was. At first, I was getting exactly what I expected, but about halfway through the book, the story just changed. I wasn't expecting it to go in the direction that it did. So I guess in a way, this is really similar to my thoughts about The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Halfway through Room, it kind of just started going in a direction that I didn't like, and I really didn't enjoy my time with the second half of the book. I can acknowledge that I really do understand why people would like this book. It explores some tough subjects. It has a really unique perspective because it's told from the perspective of the child in this situation, but I just simply didn't like the direction that it took. So that was a disappointment for me. The fourth book on this list is Leviathan Wakes by James S. A. Corey, which is the first book in the really large Expanse series by this author duo. And Leviathan Wakes, I didn't hate it. I think that it might be the highest rated book on this list because I gave it 3.5 stars, but the thing is, it was still a disappointment to me because I just didn't connect with the characters really on the whole. So it's a very action-packed book, and I was interested in the mystery, and I thought that a lot of the stuff that they did was really cool, but I'm someone who needs to connect to the characters, and if I don't, I simply won't care too much about the events that are happening because I need someone to root for and someone to really keep me grounded in what's going on, and I didn't really have that. So this is a series where I'm willing to give it a shot and pick up the second book, but because of the fact that Leviathan Wakes was disappointing to me, it did get pushed down my priority list a bit, and I'm not sure when I'm gonna get a chance to continue. Number 5 is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, and this book, I kind of put it down to the fact that it just really didn't hit for me. I was expecting something different going in from what I got. The beginning of this book was so bleak. It was really sad. I was not expecting that. And I also had to suspend my disbelief at certain points of this book to the point where it just stopped working for me. I don't want to give spoilers, but the entire premise of the book is that after your death, you get to go to the Midnight Library and you get to peruse lives that you could have led had you made different choices. And I thought that concept was really cool. I just didn't like how it was executed in this one. I wasn't convinced that the scenarios that we were exploring were realistic. I wasn't convinced that one person's choices could change them that much. And it's not that I don't believe that a person has the ability to be whatever they would like to be, but it was almost like a Mary Sue type of situation where I was like, okay, one person can't possibly have had the innate ability to become all of these things, if that makes sense. So I feel like that sounds mean, but that was one major thing that I didn't like about it. I just wasn't convinced. And so that was unfortunately a big disappointment for me because of all the hype that it was getting at the time. Number 6 on this list was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. And so this was a book that I had extremely mixed feelings about because I really liked the romance and I really liked the exploration of what it meant to be basically to be queer or part of the LGBT community in the modern day versus what it meant in, I think, like the 70s and that era and how things have changed, and like learning about the history of these movements and how we've moved forward socially, what has changed, what hasn't changed. I don't know. A lot of that I thought was really great to explore, so interesting, and a lot of the characters were really great too. I enjoyed following them, I liked their friendships, and I even liked the mystery of certain parts of the storyline that we were exploring without spoilers. But what really let me down was the sci-fi element of this book. I didn't think it made any sense. I thought it was a mess. I couldn't get it out of my head the whole book, the fact that I didn't think it made sense. So that dragged the whole book down for me. I think that if we had just had the romance and the community aspect and the friendships and like that found family thing going on, I would have really loved that. But you add this sci-fi element that seems sort of shoehorned in, really doesn't seem to make sense, didn't have a satisfying resolution in the end of the book, and it really disappointed me. So that was unfortunate. Number 7 is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune, which I do have a review of. Actually, I have a review for One Last Stop as well, so I will link both of those down in the description. But Under the Whispering Door, honestly, was a disappointment by virtue of being very average for me. Because when I read The House Under the... can't speak. When I read The House in the Cerulean Sea by this same author, I absolutely loved it, and so I just had really high hopes going into TJ Klune's second book. And I didn't hate Under the Whispering Door. I thought that it had some nice parts. I liked the concept that we were exploring about being able to live your life after death and still being able to learn things before you have to pass into the beyond. But the way that it was executed just didn't quite work for me. I wasn't as engaged as I would like to be, and I wasn't as emotionally affected as I would have been had I really connected to the story. So it was just average, and because of the expectations I had come to have after reading The House in the Cerulean Sea, it was a disappointment. And then the 8th and final book on this list is another one that I hesitate to put here, but it does fall under the category of disappointing for me, unfortunately, and I don't want everyone to kill me either, and that is Valor by John Gwynne. And the reason that this pains me to put here and that I hate that it was disappointing to me is because I want to love this series so badly, and this was a series that when I picked it up, I was so convinced that I was going to love it, based on what I've heard from other people and based on the premise and the setup and everything. Like, I really love the idea of having this huge level of conflict, this chosen one setup. I'm totally cool with that, and having like a chosen one for both the light and the dark, and having these animal companions, and having all of these creatures and this really cool mythology. All of that sounds great, and the plot is good too. But the things that didn't work for me are the things that are the most crucial for my enjoyment of a book, which is my connection to the characters and also some of the dialogue. And those things just aren't hitting for me. Like, they hit a little bit in some quiet scenes when we got to slow down and spend time with the characters. I enjoyed some of it in those scenarios. So don't get me wrong. I think I gave Valor 3.5 stars. I still liked it, but I wanted to love it, and I really truly thought that I was gonna love it. So that's why it's here. And I issue a formal apology to most of Fantasy Booktube who loves this series, but I'm still gonna continue on with it, and I'm gonna make my judgments after it's done as well, and hopefully it will grow on me more. So, I know that not everyone has the same tastes. I'm sure that there are people watching my channel who have not liked some books that I have loved this year. So there's no hard feelings or anything like that, but yeah, these were unfortunately my least favorite books that I read in the year 2021. Let me know some of yours down in the comments, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content from me, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!